Okay, hello everyone. My name is Gulczynska-Baci. I'm a senior teacher at the Cambridge Centre for Languages, and I would like to present to you the CCL method. Okay, now in order to tell you what we do and how we do it, I have to talk a little bit about the language teaching and learning, its history, okay? But I promise it's going to be short and sweet, okay? Just to show you the best bits from each approach throughout the years, and then I will present CCL, okay? So without further ado, before we start, we're going to talk about the organization of the presentation. Okay, we are going to talk about the contents and competition. It's going to be a competition between these different methods, okay? Throughout the years, in history, in our history of language learning and teaching, there have been 8 methods, okay? Now, we'll see which method will be the winner. Now, the first method is grammar translation approach, okay? What was it about? What was the purpose, the content, and the practice? Basically, the content, it was based on classical education rooted in morality. So it was classical books, novels, classic texts, long passages of text, okay? Also different genres like poetry, short stories, novels, and it was mostly about learning Latin and Greek, how to read in Latin and Greek. Okay, who was it for? What was the purpose? It was basically to teach aristocracy, often rich young men, and scholars, or future scholars, how to read Latin and Greek, as I said before. Now to teach culture and morality. So language was here taught for its own sake as an intellectual exercise. Now, what was the practice? How did they do it? So the most common exercises or tasks were back translation. So, for example, if I live and teach in Italy, I would say a sentence to my Italian students who would translate it into Italian, and then they would translate it back into English, okay? That would be an example of back translation. It was about deductive grammar instruction. So grammar was taught explicitly. Exercises and tasks like filling the blanks, vocabulary memorization were the common practice. Writing essays as well, right? So an example of what we can do that has been taken from this method, which I forgot to tell you, was about 1880s, in the 1880s, okay, writing an essay for the exams, in life, writing a diary, writing an essay. I think it's a very useful skill, right? So this sort of task is an example taken from the grammar translation approach. Now, the second method that started around 1910 and was the complete opposite of grammar translation approach was the direct approach. What was it about? It was about dialogues and conversation, right? It was about being adventurous. So in order to appreciate a different culture, geography, people, it was about passages about how other cultures live, okay? So that would be the content, maps, for example, or visual aids, objects, like my fabulous pen for today's Global Environment Day. Who was it for? Who was it directed at? People who want to travel and be completely immersed in a culture. Okay, so it was to teach students who want to study or visit other countries, to travel, to experience culture, not just classic literature, but geography, history, the people. right? How? What would be the practice used within direct approach? Would be about inductive grammar instruction, okay, or no grammar at all. It was about reading aloud. It was supposed to be like learning your first language. For example, map drawing, conversation practice, question answer, self-correction when possible, okay? So these would be the example exercises. Now, here is what we do at CCL. Here you have an example of a task. For example, role play, dialogues and conversation, ordering a coffee. Here you have an example of a role play where you have an exercise, ordering a coffee in Starbucks. Okay, because as we know, there are so many options. It's a very difficult task to actually make a decision what sort of coffee you want. Okay, so that's an example of a direct approach to language learning and teaching. Now, the third method that arrived around 1930s, okay, was the reading approach. So again, we are going back to the roots of language learning. So it's kind of similar in its deductive grammar teaching to the grammar translation method. Who was it for? What was it about? So the content of the reading approach was obviously about reading to get students ready for tests. Okay, grammatical items from readings, vocabulary words from those readings, readings that are leveled to the learner's knowledge. Okay, everybody knows the famous readers, right? That are leveled to different levels of a student. So that would be the example of reading approach. Who was it for? Basically, it was to teach students who will most likely never leave the country. Okay, it was to teach a practical skill students might actually use, and to teach by using teachers who are not native language speakers. So it was a very deductive. Speaking was de-emphasized here, as opposed to the direct approach. So again, we have the pendulum, deductive, inductive part here. Now, what was the practice? The common practice was obviously readings. It was about deductive grammar instruction, memorization of vocabulary, translation again, oral proficiency not emphasized, as I said before. It was about evaluative performance through testing, okay? And that was emphasized. Now, this is a very useful skill in life, I think, because obviously we need to have some sort of formal evaluation and assessment. And here we have two examples of the practice that we have taken from the reading approach, which is just a plain simple test to check the vocabulary, the grammar, the phrases from the unit, test 1, and also the books we use from Cambridge University Press, Think series, they have a section on preparation for the Cambridge exams, and here you have an example of the key reading and writing practice test. Okay, so this is a useful skill. It's about scanning and skimming, reading with a purpose, okay, and doing tests, because life is a test at the end of the day as well, right? Now, the fourth method, sorry, was again the complete opposite of what we talked about when we talked about reading approach, was audiolingual approach, okay? That arrived in 1940, okay, more or less in the 1940s, and it was again about speaking, okay? The speaking was emphasized here again. What was it? What was the content? It was about the military action. Okay, that was the purpose. The content. It was about language mimicry and about behaviorism. Okay, it was without focus on meaning, so people would do the action, perform a task, not necessarily understanding what they are doing. It was again about visual aids, okay, objects and pictures. And who was it for? Why? It was originally it was for the soldiers deployed to a foreign country, okay, to teach soldiers how to speak so they can communicate with enemies and allies. Right, basically to teach anyone who needs to communicate orally. Okay, there was no writing whatsoever. Right, now how? What are the practices common for this sort of method? Chains, drilling. Because it was about behaviorism, it was also about overlearning, okay, memorization of the dialogue, okay, so it was about habit formation skills, use of minimal pairs, matching chunks of language, okay, grammar games. Okay, now here we have an example of what comes from an audiolingual method. For example, what we are doing in our virtual summer camp, challenges. One of the challenges is share your Shakespeare, okay, preferably a dialogue. So what the students can do is to record or make a video of them having a dialogue like two characters from a Shakespearean play. Okay, so that's one example, but there are a lot of examples. Now, the fifth method is the cognitive approach. Okay, cognitive approach is not truly a classroom approach. Okay, a way of understanding a learner. Okay, it started in 1960. So throughout the 1960s, cognitive approach was basically for researchers, for linguists, to understand how the language works. It was about research. Noam Chomsky is the name, right? And it was about understanding how language works, to research and publish, okay? To recognize the unique properties of the human mind, okay? How did they do it? Instead of techniques, experts focused on characteristics of the learners' brains and strategies they can use to improve their learning. Okay, so language acquisition device would be the brain, and how we gain and retain information is very important to know, to have this theoretical knowledge and research and be up to date with the latest research on a learner's brain to understand and to teach better, right? Won't you agree? So that is why in CCL we have teacher training sessions in sets, because a good teacher wants to understand how students learn. That's why we have these sessions, to improve our understanding and to make the teaching more effective and enjoyable for the students, right? Now, the sixth method started in 1980. In 1970, sorry, I moved on already, and it was the effective humanistic approach. What was it about? What was the content? It was about bright colors and pictures, posters everywhere. So the interior design of the classroom as such, okay? It was about music and fine art, about dialogues and about games, right? Who was it directed at? It was for students who learn through emotions, okay? It was to respect students' feelings as they learn a language, to increase the speed of learning, okay? Now, how? how would be practice effective humanistic approach? Positive reinforcement, okay? So telling students, well done, positive motivation, choosing a new identity. So if a student is shy, they can role play and be someone else. Okay, multiple concerts, reading a dialogue with music in the background and playing it multiple times, for example. Spontaneous creative thought through dramatic interpretation. Games, singing and dancing. Okay, and these would be the common practices of this method. Here we have an example. We've got a CCL dance. Okay, all the students that join our virtual summer camp or join our lessons throughout the academic year, they can learn the CCL dance. Okay, so we have this common practice to make the students feel as if they belong, they are part of a tribe, which for a lot of people is important. Also using music in the classroom. I think it's very important, not only because of the rhythm and the pronunciation of the language, but also to make it easier, right? So here you have examples of 2 music worksheets that can be used during the lesson. Learning through lyrics, so the students' favorite music. Now, the 7th approach, we are getting to a close, is the comprehension approach. It was, and that is 1980, okay, it was a mixture. It was about inductive and deductive grammar teaching. It was about getting the meaning clear to give confidence, so using classroom objects like this is a door, this is a pen, a clock, a chair, observable actions, so jump, sit, walk, run, okay, chunks of language in novel combinations, right? So for example, the word see. I see because I have eyes, physical ability. Oh, I can see someone walking down the street. It's possible for me. Or see you later as a fixed expression to say goodbye to someone. Okay, that's an example. Now, who was it for? It's for students who need to get confident before they produce the language. Okay, so to help make meaning clear, to make input comprehensible, okay, to help learners gain confidence so that they are willing to produce the language. Okay, so we don't force people to speak before they are ready for it. Okay, it's also called a natural approach to a certain extent, because it's about being silent at first, okay, and then when you're ready, you produce the language. It's about chunks of language, it's about use of commands, it's about role reversal. So you are the teacher now, you tell me what to do. Okay, total physical response. I think this is one of my favorites, called TPR, is when you react physically to the language. Okay, and here we have an example, which is a kinesthetic listening to or reading of a story. Okay, this is an example of an exercise I used in the classroom during the CCL camp last year, and it requires minimum 7 people, maximum 11. Everybody has a character, everyone is someone else or something else. The teacher reads out the story and the people have to stand up and sit down. So it's kinesthetic, it's TPR when they hear the mention of their character. Okay, then it can be reversed, the role can be reversed. Now you are the teacher, you present something to me, ask me, give me a command, right? So this is an example of a task taken from a comprehension approach. Now, the last but not least, which started in the 1980s and is still very much used, is the communicative approach, what is it about? What's the content? It's about carefully, it's widely used today, to connect people. What is it for? To connect people, to create opportunity, be it educational, political, or business. Okay, it's for everyone, whatever the purpose might be. And it's about carefully leveled books, so variety of skills and levels. We've got reading, writing, speaking, listening, culture, authentic materials, group work, pair work, you name it. Okay, it's to connect people together in order to create opportunity and awareness, so international understanding. It's to use a language, it's to love other cultures and places, because the language is not only semantics, it's not only grammar, but it's also the people and the traditions and customs. Now, how can we do it? We use authentic materials, picture strips like comics, information gap exercises, language games, activities that meet diverse needs of a learner. Now, here's an example of using authentic materials. You could use this website. That's what I've done in my class. Use the original authentic website and make a card for a special occasion of your choice. You know, we are crazy about cards and postcards. So we have cards for every imaginable occasion. You can send a card and congratulate someone on their new house, their new car. You can send them a get well soon card if they are not feeling well. So you name it, there are so many opportunities. And here you have an authentic website that English-speaking people use to create cards and send. Okay, so occasion and themed verses, so the language, a lot of authentic language in there. That's an example. Now, so who is the winner? And the winner is everyone and no one. Everyone and no one. We know that everyone knows something and no one knows everything. And that is exactly why our approach at CCL, at Cambridge Centre for Languages, is that we use the approach that learns from all the other approaches. Okay, we don't just use one. Okay, it's a patchwork. Now, the winner is also these days blended learning. So it's about online and offline experience in learning a language and teaching it as well. It's about flipped classroom. So homework first, the knowledge first, the theoretical language first, and then the performance in class that leads to competence and getting feedback. That's what it is about. So we don't waste time, we perform, we use the language, we learn by doing. Okay, well, I hope that was clear and well, effective. This is the CCL method. If there is a method, because there is everything. It's a patchwork of fantastic ideas from all the methods that have been invented in the world and in the timeline of language learning and teaching. Thank you very much for listening. And I hope I see you soon at the virtual summer camp. Bye for now. Bye, everyone.